Hello, and welcome to ShieldScuff, where we like to go on off-camera adventures, as we take a closer look at off-screen behaviors of objects and characters that we're not meant to see, ranging from funny to very curious scenes. If you're new to the channel, check out my other videos covering God of War, and don't forget to sub if you enjoy this kind of stuff. Once again, I'll be picking up right where I left off, which was at this spike trap death room, so let's just jump right back into it. As I was saying, we had just gotten through this area where we discovered 3 skulls, embodying the proverbial principle, hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil. But moving forward, we continue on our path to the mountain and eventually come across this scene, where Kratos and Atreus approach a couple undead as they are ambushed by this raging troll. This immediately reminded me of the first troll encounter, where we were able to find the troll sliding in just out of sight as it waited to surprise attack Kratos and Atreus. I was thinking maybe this troll had a similar approach, but unfortunately, this one just materializes as it rages towards these helpless undead. This troll was definitely out for blood, but for as quick as it was spawned in, it was defeated just as quickly. Moving on, we encounter another rune chest, which isn't terribly hard to achieve, but it's after this that we encounter another hunting sequence. It's a similar encounter like we had with the deer. Well, almost similar. This time, it's a boar that has a couple off-camera tricks up his sleeve. But at no surprise, Atreus does too. When Atreus and Kratos have their first encounter with this boar, Atreus scares it off with a deflected shot. During this, you can see the boar melts through the ground and hides as the cutscene ends. So we push forward unknowingly with the boar under our feet, and take care of a few Hellwalkers on the way. After clearing the enemies, Kratos lifts the stone as they find themselves sneaking up on the boar once again. The second encounter is a little different though. Atreus lands a shot on the boar, and then quickly pursues it as it's fleeing away. During this, Kratos loses sight of Atreus for just a brief moment, resulting in losing Atreus completely. The scene ends, and then Kratos finds himself in what's considered a parent's worst nightmare. But if we go back when Kratos picks up the knife, throughout this sequence we can see that the boar goes underground yet again. But Atreus does too, just in a much more creepy manner. Eventually they are both shot over to the area where we meet the witch in the woods. This makes sense though, seeing as the player is never meant to be able to catch Atreus during this chase. So, as Kratos, we frantically make our way through this slightly confusing maze, and meet for the first time the witch in the woods. This is a cutscene where we discover that the boar is actually her friend, as she immediately requests for our help to save its life. During our life-saving efforts, Kratos is tasked with going hands-on with the boar. Breaking off camera though, reveals that he in fact just clips his hands through the boar. I gotta say though, for being off camera, Kratos looks like he's actually stopping the bleeding. It's at this point though that we discover she's a witch, and that we must follow her home to save the boar, ending the cutscene. I have to admit, I've always enjoyed the visuals of Sanctuary Grove. It gives off mystical fall-like vibes, with all the various vibrant colors surrounding you. This is where she reveals she's living under a giant tortoise, which is undoubtedly pretty cool. If we break off from the camera, we can observe the tortoise prior to it rising from underground. It's nothing too unexpected, but curious to see regardless. The two of them make their way into her home as they continue to assist her with saving the boar. She asks for ingredients that Atreus ends up going out back to retrieve. If we follow him off camera, he approaches the door as he freezes in place. Moments later, he zips outside where we later see him during the cutscene, making for mostly a straightforward sequence. It's nothing in comparison to his previous trips during cutscenes, like taking an entire trip around a room that he eventually finds himself right back in. That aside though, nothing much else happens here that's interesting, outside of the story of course. They end up getting what the witch needs, saving the boar. She then proceeds to give them thanks and lowers her home underground, where there are caverns. As we move forward, we make our way through these caverns and eventually find ourselves rowing onto Midgard's Lake of Nine. The majority of players will know that Tyr's temple is under this body of water, but if we go underwater and look before we activate the cutscene that drains the lake, we can see that everything is in place as if it were already above water. This makes sense, as we normally can't see this. hence why it doesn't even look like we're underwater. But you can see the seagulls flying around, and some even perched on parts of the structure. So, water-breathing seagulls? Check. Anyways, as we progress, we can see a statue out in the distance that starts an intense cutscene. This is where Atreus reads that they have to sacrifice their arms to the water. So, Kratos reluctantly chucks his axe into the water. Shortly after, the water suddenly begins to violently crash towards them as the lake appears to be sinking. This is because a giant serpent-like creature has risen from the lake. Hold on though, if we stop here and go back to the beginning of the scene, there's some interesting things going on off screen. When activating the cutscene, you can see this giant tidal wave lurking beneath, waiting for its cue to rise and take Kratos and Atreus away, which is pretty cool looking. I then figured we'd go way up into the sky to catch an overview of the lake. And, well, from up here you can see how the water level is dropped, as it reveals the surrounding structures, which did prove to be difficult to see, given the low visibility caused by the weather. During this monstrous cutscene though, Kratos and Atreus are introduced to the world serpent. Once the serpent fully emerges, it then spits out the Leviathan axe onto the boat, with excellent accuracy, might I add. It's during this moment though, that if we break off camera, we can see Kratos appears to be attempting a fusion dance with Atreus. Obviously we're not meant to see this, but it makes for a hilarious scene. Going back to that accurate axe loogie, I tried to see exactly where it came from, and it's safe to say that it comes from somewhere within the world serpent's open mouth. But this did drive me to go deeper and take a close look inside the serpent. And, unsurprisingly, we find a hollow shell within. Parts of the land and even low-poly birds can be found inside this beast. But the sequence comes to an end with the serpent basically taking a nap, being an overall intense cutscene. So, pushing forward, we can see that Tyr's temple becomes a new accessible area to explore. When Kratos and Atreus board the temple, a brief cutscene takes place that has a few curious off-camera moments. But this scene normally displays Kratos walking aboard the structure, looking towards the mountain. They wonder if it's the direct way, and then we once again encounter Brock. He announces himself saying that he's got something for the two of them. Atreus questions how Brock is there, and with choice words, he advises that it's none of his business. He then tells the two of them to just get in here, as the camera pans in closer to Brock. We eventually see Kratos and Atreus walk on screen, with the sequence ending. So if we take it back to where the cutscene starts, as in prior to Brock announcing himself, he can be found pounding his invisible sword. Respectfully, but the cutscene then calls upon him, dragging his imprisoned body to the scene. Out of context, it looks like he's attempting to summon Thor's hammer. Obviously this isn't the case, but it's definitely funny looking. Now, if we jump to where Brock announces himself, it's at this point that we can see Kratos doing a Power Ranger pose, as he menacingly stares down Brock.
It's morphing time.
He then elegantly skates towards Brock, while his legs twist and turn. It's a beautiful dance, fueled by nightmare fuel. But in result, Brock is paralyzed with fear as Kratos approaches, making for a painfully funny scene. If we roll back to the beginning, once again, Atreus can be seen blinking to where he needs to be for the cutscene. But it's at this point where we see his legs are jammed up into his torso as they spin around continuously. I believe his feet are maintaining collision with the surface as his torso slightly breaks through the collision, resulting with this painful sight. Why can't I feel my legs? So, when Brock announces with excitement that he has something for them, that's when Atreus springs from the ground like a spring. That had to have hurt, but I'm sure Atreus will be feeling it in the morning. The last thing I noticed was Brock's caravan. It's off to the side minding its own business as it's eating some fish. We can go in for a closer look, and it's pretty funny to watch the fish as they're being ingested. But between Atreus' creepy hide-and-seek skills, Kratos' Lake of the Nine fusion dance, and Brock being paralyzed with fear, one could say that this was an interesting spectacle. It's been pretty fun so far with getting to take a peek at some of the things that we're not meant to really see. I do hope you enjoyed this off-camera journey. Hit the like and subscribe button if you did. I will definitely be continuing this adventure of ours. Who knows what we may encounter next. But until then, later.